Hello, I'm Brasight,
And I'm Melodious Nocturne.
and this is The Portraits. There was a hunter in the woods who, after a long day hunting, was in the middle of an immense forest. It was getting dark, and having lost his bearings, he decided to head in one direction until he was clear of the increasingly oppressive foliage. After what seemed like hours, he came across a cabin in a small clearing. Realizing how dark it had grown, he decided to see if he could stay there for the night. He approached and found the door ajar. Nobody was inside. The hunter flopped down on the single bed, deciding to explain himself to the owner in the morning. As he looked around the inside of the cabin, he was surprised to see the walls adorned by several portraits, all painted in incredible detail. Without exception, they appeared to be staring down at him, their features twisted into looks of hatred and malice. Staring back, he grew increasingly uncomfortable. Making a concerted effort to ignore the many hateful faces, he turned to face the wall, and, exhausted, he fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, the hunter awoke. He turned blinking in unexpected sunlight. Looking up, he discovered that the cabin had no portraits, only windows.
Give it a minute. Let it sink in.
Few more seconds.
Think about it.
I'm sure it's about to set that. There it is.
There are the gasped, startled expressions.
So you might have noticed that we weren't pausing every so often to point out some logical errors in this one.
That's because both of us actually love this one.
It does something that a lot of other pastas don't do. It relies on a very subtle form of horror. It doesn't have the monster like jump out at you. It's not like it's scraping against the door, knocks it open, and then drags the hunter into the darkness. No, the thing here is he wakes up to find that what he believed to be true was incorrect. He wakes up and finds that all those portraits he thought the night before weren't. He's waking up and he's now alone, and there's something else out there.
Like, best case scenario for this guy right now, there are a bunch of crazy people that are now not there anymore. They're in the woods that he has to go through right now to get home.
And it's something you don't see a lot of, because it's actually a pretty hard form of humor to write, or not humor. Humor. Yay!
Two sides, same coin.
But it's something you don't see a lot of in creepypastas, because it's a form of horror that just you don't really see, because it's really hard to write. It's really hard to write the feeling of dread.
Like, yeah, a lot of people that write creepypastas, when they're writing it, at some point it seems like they don't feel like it's scary enough, so they feel like they need to make sure their reader comes out of that scared. So they do something really overt, non-subtle, like Umbra mentioned there, just like the monster knocking down the door and carrying the hunter away. And a lot of times that kind of backfires. Like, it isn't creepy, it usually isn't scary or anything, it's just Yeah.
It's a lot of times you get what it comes to what I'm just going to call the expected conclusion. Is it this one? If you start reading it and you get to the area the portraits all look angry. When I first was listening to this being read, I originally thought that the hunter was then going to wake in the morning as one of the portraits. And it's something you see a lot of in these creepypastas is a lot of them seem to move towards this very expected conclusion. And it's the ones that break what I expect that I usually like. Because those are usually the ones that go for a more subtle approach to what's happening at the end.
Those are the ones that usually end up actually being creepy.
It's the feeling of dread versus the sudden shock. That's the difference between horror and a jump scare. Horror is the realization that, to steal a quote, that you wake up and find that everything you own has been replaced by an exact replica. And the jump scare is you're walking into your room, a cat screams really loud and jumps right in front of your face, then runs down the hall.
It's like, don't get us wrong, jump scares aren't bad. There's a time and place for everything, jump scares included. Like, if you're just constantly building up suspense and, not necessarily for this one, because this one's a shorter story, but for, a longer story, if you're just, constantly building up suspense and there's never at any point, anything like a jump scare, to actually show you something could in fact happen at any second, then eventually the reader or player, watcher, whatever, they'll just kind of start to get disinterested because it's like, well, nothing's probably going to happen at this point.
Yeah, that's the great part of the jump scares. It shows that the suspense has reason. And it has to be done correctly, because if you have a jump scare that basically just lays it all on the table, you get a very clear view of what the monster or creature or what the other person looks like. The idea of horror comes from the fact that the human brain needs to know what's happening at all times. And once the human brain knows, it can categorize. And once it can categorize, it instantly becomes less scary. Where this, it would be... The reason why this becomes much more horrifying, much more creepy, is because we don't know why the people are looking through the windows. We know they're there. We know they all looked very pissed off with the hunter, but we don't know why they spent the whole night staring at the hunter and didn't do anything.
And now that the hunter's awake, we also don't know where they've gone, what they're doing now, if they're going to do anything in the future.
And that's what this does really well, is it plays its cards, and then it holds something back to leave to the reader's imagination. And it does it well, because there are a lot of times where you hold too much back, and you leave the reader going, well, why? Why are they doing this? What's happening? For what reason or purpose? It's a really hard thing to write, because there's a lot of back and forth. You have to show enough that the reader can understand, but you don't want to show too much that the reader feels like there's no purpose. Or they feel like they've gotten to the end and there's just too many unknowns.
Yeah.
Well, I believe we've about covered everything as to why we enjoy the portrait so much.
Yeah. We'll link it in the description if you want to read it by yourself later.
And thank you all for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks for watching. See you later.